Κύριε ελέησον.
Της Παναγίας Ακράτου, υπερευλογημένης εν δόξου δεσποινής ημών Θεοτόσων και εκ Πατράς Μαρίας, με τα πάντα των Αγίων υπονεύσαντες, εαυτούς και αλλήλους και πάσα την ζωήν ημών, Χριστό το Θεό παραδόμεθα. For blessed is your name and glorified is your kingdom, of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, now and always and unto ages of ages.
The women bearing courage to declare the matter of your paradoxal rising to your apostles. O Christ, let us gather your rose, granting the world great mercy. Et me otitos mu polemin me pati, alla choves anti la puike soson sotir mon. You the haters of Zion, be good to say, fighting is the Lord, for like that's in fire, he will be completely dried up. Δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγία Πνεύματι και νικαία και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Αγία Πνεύματι πάσα ψυχή ζωούτε και καθάρση υψούτε λαμπρίνετε, η τριαδική μονάδη ιεροκρηφίος. I cry to you, O Lord, from the depth of my soul with fervor. Let your divine ears be responsive to me. Επί των Κυρίων ελπίδα πάσης και κτημένος, υψηλότερος εστί φάρμα των λειτούντων. The glory to the Father, to the Son, and Holy Spirit, both now and ever to the ages of ages. Amen. From the Holy Spirit to the streams of praise will pour, they irrigate everything created, so that life be engendered. Η καρδία μου προσέλω και υψωθήτω, και ουδεν θέλξει μέτων του κόσμου τερκνών προς αμεσηλίαν. Whereas one has filial affection for his mother, for the Lord, we ought to have a love even more fervent. Δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγία Πνεύματι και νικαία η Χριστός αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Αγίο Πνεύματι Θεογνωσίας, πλούτος θεωρίας και σοφίας, πάντα καρευτούτο τα πατρώα δόγματα ο λόγος σε καλύπτει. Ανάστα Κύριε βοήθησον, ημίν περίτρουσε ημάς ένεκεν της δόξης του ονόματός Σου. Rise, O Lord, help us and redeem us because of the glory of your name. Ο Θεός εν σου συνημών οικούσαμεν, ανάστα Κύριε βοήθησον ημίν και ρήτρουσε ημάς ένεκεν της δόξης του ονόματός Σου. Ο σωτήρ και ρίσισμα από τους τάφους Θεός ανέστησαν εκ των δεσμών τους γηγενείς, και πύλας άδος συνέδριψε και ο δεσπότης ανέστη τριήμερος. Και ο δεσπότης ανέστη τριήμερος. Τον αστάντα εκ νεκρών Χριστών προσοδότην τριήμερον μετά και πύλας του θανάτου σήμερος του πλάσσοντα, τη δυνάμει και αυτού τον άλλον τον νεκρόσοντα και το κέντρο του θανάτου συντρίψοντα και τον Αδάμ συσκεύω αληθερώσοντα. Ενίσαμεν πάντες υγιενείς ευχαρίστως πόντες έναν ευθενός, αυτός καθώς μόνος πρωτέος και Θεός και Δεσπότης ανέστη τριήμερος. Συναξάρων τη δόμη του αυτό μηνός μνήμη του Αγίου Μάρτυρος Καλλιοπίου. Unable 7 to commemorate the holy Martyr Καλλιόπιος. Και αυτή η μέρα μνήμη του Αναγίας Πατρός ημών Γεωργίου Επισκόπου Μυτιλήνης του Σημειοφόρου. On this day we also commemorate our Father among the saints, George, Bishop of Mytilene, the worker of signs and wonders. Και αυτή η μέρα μνήμη του Αγίου Μάρτυρος Ρουφίνου Διακόνου. On this day we also commemorate the Holy Martyr Rufinus the Deacon. Και αυτή η μέρα η Αγία Μάρτυς Αχιλλίνα, τα σκύρος της του πίσοντος με φρύσα και την κοιλία του πίσω τελειούνται. On this day the Holy Martyr Αχιλλίνα died after the tied her hands and burned her body. Και αυτή η μέρα μνήμη των Αγίων Διακοσίων Μαρτύρων των Ενσυνόπηξη Τελειοδέλων. On this day we also commemorate the Holy 200 martyrs in Sinop who died by the sword. Και αυτή η μέρα μνήμη του Οσίου και Θεοφόρου Πατρός ημών Σάββα του Νέου του Ενκαλύμνου. On this day we also commemorate our devout and God-bearing Father Σάββας the New Καλύμνος. Και αυτή η μέρα Κυριακή Τετάρτη των Ιστιών μνήμην ποιούμεν του Οσίου Πατρός ημών Ιωάννου του συγγραφέως της Climacus. On this day, the fourth Sunday of Lent, we commemorate our devout Father John, author of the latter. Τες αυτού πρεσβείες ο Θεός ελέησον και σώσον ημάς. Αμήν. but with his intercession, so God have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
Ανοίξοντος στόμα μου και πληρωθήσετε πνεύματος και ρόλεψομαι τη βασιλή της ήλη και οφθήσομαι παιδρός πανηγυρίζων και ασχοληθόμενος πρακτήστε θαύματα.
Ρωτήσαντας πνευματικών στερεώσεων και εν τη Θεία δόξη σου
Στεφάνων δόξης αξίωσον
την ανεξιχνίας των Θείων βουλήν της εκ της Παρθένους αφόσεως σου του υψιστούν ο προφήτης Αββάτων κατά νόν εκράφκασε δόξα τη δυνάμει σου Κύριε.
Εξέστη τα σύμπαντα επί τη Θεία δόξη σου, σίγαρα πυρόγα με Παρθένε, έσχεσαι μήτρα των επιπάντων Θεών και τέτοκας ακρονόνιων, βάση της υμνούσης σωτηρία βλαβέποντα.
Θείαν ταύτην και πάντημον τελούντες εορτήν οι Θεόφρονες της Θεομήτωρος, βέρτετας χείρας πρωτίσομεν τον εξ αυτής τεχθέντα Θεόν δοξάζονται.
Και λάτρευσαν την κτήση οι Θεόφρονες, παρατοκτήσαντα, αλλά πυρός απειλής. Ανδρείος πατήσαντες χαίροντες έξαλλον, υπερήμνητε, ο τον Πατέρα Κύριος και Θεός ευλογητός.
Ευλογούμεν και προσκυνούμεν τον Κύριον, πέτα εσεβαγήσεν τη καμίνον του όγκος της Θεοτόκου διασώσατον, ούτε μεν τυπούμενος, νυν δεν εργούμενος, την οικουμένην άπασαν να κηρυψώνουσαν τον Κύριον, ημίτε τα έργα και υπερυψούτε εις πάντας τους αιώνας.
Let us pray to the Lord. Ότι άισαι ο Θεός ημών και νεγείς απαναπαύει και εσύ τη δόξα να αναπέμπομεν το Πατρί και το Υιό και το Αγίο Πνεύμα την και αή και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
Αμήν πάσα πνοήεν εσάλτω τον Κύριον.
Let everything that breathes praise the Lord.
Πάσα τον Κύριον.
That we may be found worthy to hear the Holy Gospel, let us entreat the Lord our God. Wisdom, let us stand aright, let us hear the words of the Holy Gospel. Peace be with you all.
And with your spirit.
The lesson is taken according to the Gospel of St. Matthew. Let us attend.
Glory to you, O Lord, glory to you.
At that time, the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some were there who doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always to the close of the age.
Glory to you, O Lord, glory to you. Having beheld the resurrection of Christ, let us worship the Holy Lord Jesus, the only sinless one. resurrection we praise and glorify. For you are our God, apart from you we know no other. We call upon your name, come our faithful, let us venerate the holy resurrection of Christ. For behold, through the cross, joy has become to the whole world. Ever blessing the Lord, let us praise his resurrection. For having endured the cross for us, he destroyed death by death.
Ελεήμων ελέησον ο Θεός κατά το μέγαλος σου και κατά το πλήθος των εκκλημών σου εξέλιξον το ανώμημά μου.
Wash me thoroughly from my lawlessness and cleanse me from my sin.
Ότι την ανομία μου εγώ γινώσκω και η αμαρτία μου ενώπιον στη διαπαντών.
Against you only have I sinned and done evil in your sight, that we may be justified in your words and overcome when you are just.
Ιδούγα εν ανομίες συνελήφθη και αμαρτίες εκείσισαμε ημίτην μου.
Behold, you love truth, you showed me the unknown and secret things of your wisdom.
Αντίς με ισόπεν και καθαριστήσαμε, πληνείς με και υπερχιόν ανευκανθήσαμε.
You shall make me hear joy and gladness, my bones that were humble shall greatly rejoice.
Απόστρεψον το πρόσωπον σου από των αμαρτιών μου και πάσος τας ενομίες μου εξάρριψον.
Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me.
Μη απορρίψεις με από το προσώπου σου και το πνεύμα σου το Άγιον μη αντανέλεις απεμού.
Restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with your guiding spirit.
Διδάξον όμως τας οδούς σου και ασεβείς, επισέπεις το
Deliver me from blood guiltiness, O God, the God of my salvation, and my tongue shall greatly rejoice in your righteousness.
Κύριε, τα χείλη μου ανοίξεις και το στόμα μου αναγγελεί την ένταση
For if it is
σου.
your sacrifice, I will give it. You will not be pleased with whole burnt offerings.
Θυσία το Θεό πνεύμα συντετριμένον, καρδία συντετριμένη και τεταπειναμένη ο Θεός, ου και εξουδενώσει.
Do good, O Lord, and give good pleasure to Zion, and let the walls of Jerusalem be built.
Τότε ευδοκίσεις θυσία δικαιοσύνης αναφορά και ολοκαυτώματα.
Then shall they offer young bulls on your altar, and have mercy on me, O God.
Δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγίο Πνεύματι της μετανοίας ανοίξον μυστήρας ζωδόταν
Racimos tan vion mon,
Send down upon us your abundant mercies, through the intercessions of our most pure Lady, the Theotokos, and of the Virgin Mary, through the power of the precious life-giving cross, through the prayers of the honorable, boundless heavenly powers, of the honorable, glorious prophet and forerunner John the Baptist, τον μεγάλο ιεραρχόν και οικουμενικό διδασκάλων, βασιλείου του μεγάλου γρήγορου του Θεολόγου και Ιωάννου του Χρυσοστόμου, Αθανασίου και Κυρίου Ιωάννου τελέγονος Πατριαρχών Αλεξανδρίας, Νικολάου του Εμμύρη Σπυρίδωρος Επισκόπου Τριμηθούντος και Νεκταρίου Πενταπόλεμος των Θαυματουργών, the martyrs George the Standard-Bearer, Demetrius the Myrrh-flowing, Minas the wonder-workers, Eleftherius and Haralambos, the holy priest martyrs, of the holy glorious great martyrs, Thecla, Barbara, Anastasia, Ekaterina, Kyriaki, Fotini, Marina, Paraskevi, and Irene, of the holy glorious and victorious martyrs, of our venerable and parasitic fathers, of the holy and righteous ancestors of God, Joachim and Anna, of John of the latter, Calliopas the martyrs, whose memory we commemorate this day, and of all your saints. Ηγετευομέν σε μόνε πολλέλε, Κύριε, επάκους ότι μόν των αμαρτωλών θεαμένων σου, και ελέησον ημάς.
Κύριε ελέησον, Κύριε ελέησον, Κύριε ελέησον. Κύριε ελέησον, Κύριε ελέησον. Κύριε ελέησον, Κύριε ελέησον, Κύριε ελέησον.
Παναγίο και αγαθό και στο Θεό σου πνεύμα τηρήν και αήν και στους αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Την Θεοτόκον και μητέρα του φωτός εν ύμνης τιμώντες μεγαλύνομαι.
Μεγαλύνη ψυχή μου τον Κύριο και αγίασε το πνεύμα μου αντί το Θεό, το σωτήριμο, την ποινία πτέρα των χερουβίμ και ενδόξωμένα συγκρίνας τα σεραφείμ, αδιαφθόρος θεολόγων τρυπούσαν, την όντως Θεοτόκον σε μεγαλύνομεν.
He has regarded the lowly estate of his maidservant, for behold, henceforth all generations will call me blessed.
For honorable and the cherubim, and the uncomparable glorious than the seraphim, incorruptibly
ψυχής των τόνων όσια και δώσαν κάθε πλούτη σας ουράνιον αίδημε διόμοι πάψη πρεσβεύων υπερήμων Ιωάννη.
Καταστρεψάμενον
συψώσεις εφέτες, μελέτων πρακτικότατα, τα Θεόπνευστα λόγια πάσοφεν, και την εκείθεν άλλα πηγάσουσαν, χάριν επλούτησας, και γονός μακάριος των ασεβών, πάντων τα βουλεύματα, τα στρεψάμενος.
Μακάριος ανηροφαγμένος των Κύριων εν τες εντολές αυτού, θελήσεις φόρα, Πάτερ Ιωάννη έδοξε, Πάτες των δακρύων πήγες, την ψυχή καθερώμενος, και πανήγιος τας εσύ, των Θεών ηλασκόμενος, ανευθερώθης προς την αγάπηση, την τούτο άκρ και ωραιότηταν, εις επαξίωση απολάβεις άνοιχτα χαρμονικός, μετά των συνάθρων σου,
Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful ones. Glorious Father God, your fountain of tears cleansed your soul, and all night vigils gave your God's mercy. O Blessed One, you were uplifted to his glory, and beauty as though upon wings. Now you deserve to enjoy this in endless harmony with those who spiritually contend with you. Oh God, minded saint.
Άγιος
Ευλογημένη Βασιλεία του Πατρός και του Υιού και του Αγίου Πνεύματος, νυν και αεί, εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
Αμήν.
Εν ειρήνη του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν. Υπέρ της άνωθεν ειρήνης και της σωτηρίας των ψυχών ημών του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν. Υπέρ της ειρήνης του σύμπαντος κόσμου, της ευθείας των Αγίων του Θεού Εκκλησιών και της των πάντων ενώσεως του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν. Υπέρ του Αγίου οίκου τούτου και των μεταπίστεως ευλογίας και φόβου Θεού εισιόντων αυτό του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν. Υπέρ του Αρχισκόπου ημών Αλεξίου του Τιμίου Πρεσβυτερίου της εν Χριστώ διακονίας παντός του κλήρου και του λαού του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν. Υπέρ του ευσεβούς ημών έθνους, πάσης αρχής και εξουσίας εν αυτό του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν. For this parish and this city, for every city and town, and for the faithful who dwell in them, let us pray to the Lord.
Have mercy.
For favorable weather and abundance of the fruits of the earth, and for temperate seasons, let us pray to the Lord.
Have mercy.
For travelers by land, sea, air, and space, for the sick and the suffering, for captives and for their salvation, let us pray to the Lord.
Have mercy.
For our deliverance from all affliction, wrath, danger, and distress, let us pray to the Lord.
Have mercy.
Αντιλαβούς σώσον ελέησον και διαφύλαξον ημάς ο Θεός της συγχαρητή.
Have mercy.
Της Παναγίας Ακράνου υπερευλογημένης εν δόξου δεσποινής ημών Θεοτόκου και αϊπανθέν Μαρίας με τα πάντων των Αγίων γονεύσαντες και αυτούς και αλλήλους και πάσαν την ζωήν ημών Χριστό το Θεό παράθομεθα. For yours belong all glory, honor, and worship to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, now and always, and into ages of ages.
Αμήν. Ευλογήσει και του τον Κύριον και πάντα τα εντός μου το όνομα του Αγίων αυτού, τες πρεσβείες της Θεοτόκου, σώτερ σώσον ημάς.
Ευλόγησε και με τον Κύριον και μη επιλαμβάνω πάσας τας αναποδόσεις αυτού, through the intercessions of the Theotokos, Savior, save us.
Κύριος εν το ρόλο ετοίμασε τον θρόνο αυτού, η βασιλεία αυτού πάντων δεσπόζει, τες πρεσβείες της Θεοτόκου, σώτερ σώσον ημάς.
Again and again in peace let us pray to the Lord.
Have mercy.
Help us, save us, have mercy upon us, and protect us, O God, by your grace.
Have mercy.
Remembering our most holy, most pure, blessed, and glorious Lady, the Theotokos and Everholy Mary, with all the saints, let us commit ourselves and one another and our whole life unto Christ our God.
Lord.
For yours is the dominion, the kingdom,
Κύριον, ενέσω Κύριον, εν τη ζωή μου ψαλώ το Θεό μου έως υπάρχω. Σώσον ημάς Ιε Θεού, Αναστάς εκ νεκρών, ψάλλοντας η Αλληλούια.
Μακάριος που ο Θεός Ιακώβ βοηθός αυτού, και επίς αυτού επί Κύριον των Θεών αυτού, σώσον ημάς Ιε Θεού, ο Αναστάς εκ νεκρών, ψάλλοντας η Αλληλούια.
Δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγίου Πνεύματι, και νυν και αεί και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Ο μονογενής Υιός και Λόγος του Θεού, αθάνατος υπάρχων, και καταδεξάμενος διά την ημετέραν σωτηρίαν, σαρκωθήνε εκ της Αγίας Θεοτόκου και αη Παρθένου Μαρίας ατρέπτος εν ανθρωπίσας, σταυρωθήστε Χριστέ ο Θεός θανάτου θάνατον παθήσας, εις όλη της Αγίας Τριάδος, συντοξαζόμενος το Πατρί και το Αγίο Πνεύματι, σώσον ημάς.
Έτσι και την ειρήνη του Κυρίου δεηθώμε, αντιλάβους όσων ελέησον και διαφύλαξον ημάς ο Θεός της ηχάρητη, της Παναγίας Ακράντου υπερευλογημένης εν δόξου δεσποινής ημών Θεοτόκου, καί Παρθέν Μαρίας, με τα πάντων των Αγίων μνημονεύσαντες, εαυτούς και αλλήλους και πάσαν την ζωή ημών, Χριστό το Θεό παρακόμεθα. Ότι αγαθός και φιλάνθρωπος Θεός υπάρχεις και εσύ τη δόξα να αναπέμβομεν, το Πατρί και το Υιό και το Αγίο Πνεύμα την ίν και αή και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
Αμήν. Αυτή η μέρα Κυρίου είναι πίσεν ο Κύριος εγκαλιασόμεθα και εφρανθόμενεν αυτή, το φεδρόν της Αναστάσεως κήρυγμα εκ του αγγέλου μαθούσε, εκ του Κυρίου μαθήτριε, και την προγονική απόφαση να κορύψασε, της Αποστόλης καθόμενε λέγω, εσκύλευτε ο θάνατος, ηγέρθη Χριστός ο Θεός, θωρούμενος στον κόσμο το μέγα έλεος.
Come, let us bow down to Christ as we worship Him, the Son of God. Save us, the Son of God, and then rise from the dead. We sing to Thee, Hallelujah.
Εσκύλευτε ο θάνατος, ηγέρθη Χριστός ο Θεός,
εις εκατόν τους πόνους εκαταποβολήσας και γέγονας φωστήρ, την οικουμένη λάμπρον συθαύμαση, Ιωάννη πατήρι μονοσίε, πρέσβευε Χριστό το Θεό, σωθήνετας τσιγάς ημών.
Σήμερον της σωτηρίας ημών το κεφάλαιον και του απεώνος μυστηρίου υπανέλωσης, ο Υιός του Θεού Υιός εις Πατέρου γίνεται και Γαβριήλ τη χάριν ευαγγελίζεται, Διός είναι αυτό τη Θεοτόκο βοήσομεν, χαίρε και χαριτωμένη ο Κύριος μετά σου.
Ότι Άγιος ο Θεός ημών και σε την δόξα αναπέμπουμε, του Πατρί και του Υιού και του Αγίου Πνεύματι νυν και αεί, εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
Αμήν.
Δόξα Πατρί Έχουμε της ψυχής ασφαλείτε και βεβαίως αρχιερεύς και νόμενος εις τον αιώνα.
The reading is from St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews.
Let us be attentive.
Brethren, when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore to himself, saying, "Surely I will bless you and multiply you." And thus Abraham, having patiently endured, obtained the promise. Men indeed swear by a greater than themselves, and in all their disputes, an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he interposed with an oath, so that through two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible that God should prove false, we who have fled for a refuge might have strong encouragement to seize the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner shrine behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever and after the order of Melchizedek.
Peace be with you both who read it.
Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Sophia, Thea, Testament, Waju, Evangeliu, Kyrie, Vasi.
Το πνεύμα Χριστού.
Εκ του κατά Μάρκον Αγίου Ευαγγελίου του ανάγνωσμα πρόσωμεν.
Δόξα σοι, Κύριε, δόξα σοι.
Το καιρό εκείνο, άνθρωπος της προσήλθε του Ιησού λέγον, διδάσκαλε, ήνικαν των ιών σου πρόσεχ, έχοντα πνεύμα άλλαλον, και όπου εν αυτόν καταλάβει η ρίση αυτόν, και αφρίσει και τρίζει τους οδόντας αυτού, και ξενένεται, και είπουν τις μαθητές σου, ειν αυτό εκβάλλωση, και ουκίστησαν. Ο δε αποκριστής αυτό λέγον, «Ω γενεάπιστος, έως πότε προς ημάς έσουμε, έως πότε ανέξουμε ημίν. Φέρετε αυτόν προς με, και ήνικαν αυτόν προς αυτόν, και ειδών αυτόν, ευθέως το πνεύμα, εσπάραξεν αυτόν, και πεσόν επί της γης, εκειλίε το αφρίζον. Και απειρώτησεν τον πατέρα αυτού, πόσος χρόνος έστι ως τούτο γέγονεν αυτό, ο δε είπε, παιδιώθεν, και πολλάκις αυτόν και εις πυρέβαλε, και εις ύδατα, ή να απολέσει αυτόν. Αλήτη δίναστε, βοήθησον ημίν, σπλαχνιστής επί μας. Ο δε Ιησούς είπεν αυτόν, το δίναστε πιστεύσε, πάντα δυνατά το πιστεύοντι, και ευθέως κράξος ο πατήρ του παιδίου, με τα δακρύων έλεγε, πιστεύω Κύριε βοήθημι τη απιστία. Ειδών δε ο Ιησούς, ότι τη συνετρέχει όχλος, επεκτίμησε το πνεύμα το ακαθάρτο, λέγω αυτό, το πνεύμα το άλαβον και εκκοφών, εγώ σοι επιτάσσω, έξελθε εξ αυτού, και μηκέτης έλθεις εις αυτόν, και κράξας και πολλά σπαράξας αυτόν εξήλθεν, και γίνεται ως η νεκρός, ως δε πολλούς λέγει ότι απέθανεν, ο δε Ιησούς κρατήσας αυτόν της γης χειρός, ήγηρεν αυτόν και ανέστη, και εισελθόντα αυτόν εις οίκον οι μαθηταί αυτού, επιρώτων αυτόν κατηδίαν, ότι εμείς του δυνήθαμεν εκβάλλειν αυτό, και είπεν αυτοίς, τούτο το γένος, εν ουδενή δυνατέ, excelti, is mien prosepticen istia, ecithen exaltondes parecorebundo diatis Galileas, quiutilen ina tisno, et idas gegatus mafitas aptu, que elegen aptis, odioios tu anthropu, paradido tenis iras anthropon, que apoctenusi, que apton, apoctantis, vitritimena anastisete. The lesson is taken according to the Gospel of St. Mark. Let us attend. At that time a man came to Jesus kneeling and saying, Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a dumb spirit. And wherever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. And he answered them, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. And they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, How long has he been like this? He said, From childhood. And it has often cast him into the fire, into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have pity on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, If you can, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, You dumb and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him, and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out. And the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, Why could we not cast it out? And he said to them, This kind cannot be driven out by anything but by prayer and fasting. And they went out from there and passed through Galilee, and he would not have one know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, The Son of Man will be delivered unto the hands of men, and they will kill him, and when he is killed, after 3 days he will arise.
So, glory to you, O Lord, glory to you.
Si doxan anathemomen, tu patrike to ioge tu aiu pneumatinin ke ai, eis te seonas to neonu. Therefore, I implore you, heart of evil consciousness, enabled by the power of the Spirit to the best of the grace of the priesthood. I may stand before your holy table and celebrate the mystery of your pure holy body. To you I come with bowed head, and do not turn your face away from me nor reject me from my children, but make me your simple and unworthy servant worthy to offer to you these gifts. For you, Christ, are God of the offerer, the one who receives and distributed, and to him you ascribe glory, together with your all holy, good and life-giving Spirit, now and ever unto the ages of ages. Amen. In the cherubim, mysticos y felices, Espíritu de Dios criado, consagrado y consagrados, paso de Dios que me toma de venga, nos constante, consagrado, así que quieras ramos, conectarse así. Aleluya, aleluya, aleluya. Tenía más
Amen.
Σταυρωθέντα τρει περιμόν, επικοντήρου Πιλάτου και παθόντα και τα πέντα, και αναστάντα την τρίτη μέρα κατά τα σγραφάς, και ανελθόντα εις τους ουρανούς, και κατεζόμουν δεξιών του Πατρός, και πάλι ερχόμενο με τα δόξης, κρίνες ζώντας και νεκρούς, που της βασιλείας σου και έστε τέλος. Και στο πνεύμα του Άγιου, το Κύριο, του Ζωφιών, το εκ του Πατρός εκπορευόμενον, το Σύμπατρι και Υιός προσκυνούμενον και συνδοξαζόμενον το λαλήσαν διά των προφητών, εις Θεία Αγία Καθολική και Αποστολική Εκκλησία, ομολογώ εν βάπτισμα εις άφεσιν αμαρτιών, προσδοκώ ανάσταση νεκρών και ζωή του μέλλοντος αιώνας. Αμήν. I believe in one God, Father Almighty, Creator of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, begotten of the Father before all ages, light of light, true God of true God, begotten, not created, of one essence with the Father, through whom all things were made, who for us men and for our salvation came down from heaven and was incarnate of the Holy Spirit and the Virgin Mary and became man. He was crucified for us under Pontius Pilate and suffered and was buried. And he rose on the third day according to the Scriptures. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will come again with glory to judge the living and the dead. His kingdom shall have no end. And in the Holy Spirit of the Lord, the Creator of life, who proceeds from the Father, who together with the Father and the Son, who is worshipped and glorified, who spoke through the prophets, in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, I confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins, and look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the age to come. Amen.
Please be seated. Kalimera. Good morning. So we continue with our lessons, our catechetical lessons. Last week we had a number of guests, and they all commented how much they enjoyed what we do here. It would be nice, they said, if all the churches did something like this. So maybe we will begin a trend in the area. I'm sure that if people go to their priest and say, I like that, why don't you do it? Maybe they will begin to do it as well. As I mentioned to you, during the Lenten period, there is a logic to it. The first Sunday of Great Lent is Orthodox Sunday, Sunday of the Icons. The second Sunday, Gregory Palamas. The third Sunday, last week, the Stavros Proskynesios, the veneration of the Holy Cross. And now the fourth Sunday of the Lenten period is focused on St. John Climacus, St. John of the Ladder. And it's one thing to know what the days are, it's another thing to understand why they are the way they are. So the icon here on your worship guide is the reason why we have this for you, so that it's not something for you to do during liturgy, but it's something to help you in your worship as we gather together during the liturgy. So in here you find the Liturgia, you find the Kondakia, all the different things that change. Some stay the same, some change based on the season or the feast day. So because today, as I said, we focus on Gregory, as even St. John Climacus, we have some things that are important to him, especially the icon that I want to talk to you about. First of all, St. John Climacus, although we celebrate his feast day, or we acknowledge him, I should say, on the fourth Sunday of Great Lent, he has a feast day. There is a day in the year that we celebrate the death, the passing from this life to heaven of St. John Climacus. I'm not sure if you know, it's March the 30th. March the 30th. It's interesting that we know certain saints in the church, we know their feast days, but the big guns of the church, sometimes we don't know. And St. John Climacus is considered so important in the church. Not only do we celebrate his feast day on the 30th of March, but also on the fourth Sunday of Lent. So that should say something to us. He lived in the 6th century. So the Lent that we have existed before they said on this Sunday we're going to focus on St. Gregory. It was later that the church added him to it. Same thing with the Sunday Orthodox. The Sunday of Orthodoxy, as you know, is 9th century, came after Lent had already begun. So we have to ask ourselves, why did the church do that? It did that because St. John was an ascete, was a ascetic, excuse me, a monk of Sinai. And you know Sinai is right where the desert is. So many of the monks, they would go into the desert for many days during the Lenten period and come back. And so we have this 40 days that goes along with the 40 years of the Jews in the desert. This you know. But what you may not know is St. John of the Ladder spent 40 years in the desert. He went on his own by himself, and there he perfected, so to speak, spirituality. And when he came back to the world, after 40 years, you can imagine, as an older man, he became the abbot of the monastery of Mount Sinai. If you ever go to Mount Sinai, you will see the big icon of St. John Climacus. And when he came back, the monks said, "Teach us. How should we become spiritual? What should we do?" And they forced him. He didn't want to, out of humility. He wrote the Ladder of Divine Ascent for his spiritual children. And he left this book to us. And so during the Lenten period, the monks, still to this day, all over the world, Orthodox monks, they use the Ladder of Divine Ascent, that book, in order to help them during Lent. Next year, I told those of you who have been coming to the class on Friday night that we're going to, as a community, God willing, if we are still together, we're going to take the book, the Ladder, Climacus, 21, and that's going to be what we're going to study during the 40 days together. And I'll take you through step by step by step, and you're going to realize that although there are 30 steps, he said 30 steps equal to the age of Jesus. So when Jesus began his ministry, he was 30 years of age. So therefore, we should begin. It takes 30 years to find perfection, so to speak, in our own lives. And you will see in the book, I'll mention a little bit about it in my sermon, that some of the things that you want to do now, you say, "Oh, Father, how can I do this? How can I do that?" They're much further up in the rungs. So oftentimes we jump too quickly as opposed to starting where we should start and be firm in the beginning. Much can be said about Climacus, but let's look at the icon for a minute, and you'll see some interesting things there. There are many different icones of this Climacus, but this is a simple one that they have here. If you count the rungs, they're not 30, so I'm sure some of you have already counted. I think there are 21. But it's supposed to be 30 rungs of the ladder. And you notice he's holding a scroll, and on the scroll it says, "Brethren, ascend. Ascend, brethren. Ascend eagerly." Eagerly. To want to go up. To want to go up to God. So there has to be, in the beginning, he says, a vipsa, a hunger to want to go up to God. That's the beginning, he says. And sometimes it takes years and years and years of Lent for someone to have a hunger for God, as much as a hunger for other things. So we get stuck, he says, on the first step. We want to jump, but we need to have this pina, this dipsa for God. Notice how none of the men have halos. The only one with a halo is St. John. Notice that there are men and not women, because the ancient icons of this, as I said, this was for monks. So most of the icons do not have women in it, but later on, as time went on, 9th century, 12th century, today, there are larger icons that have all kinds of people climbing up. As you see, they're climbing up. Now this ladder is based on Jacob in the Old Testament. Remember, he rested on a rock and he dreamt of a ladder, and on the ladder he saw angels ascending and descending. And when he found Philip and Nathanael in the first chapter of the Gospel of St. John, in the 52nd verse of the first chapter of the Gospel of St. John, Jesus says, "You think it was so nice that I saw you under the fig tree? You," talking to the disciples, "you will see more than this. You will see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man." He was talking about his death and resurrection. And that's why oftentimes, you don't see it here, but when you see the Stavro of Christ, usually you see a ladder leaning up against it. And that ladder leaning up against it is the image that the ladder by which we ascend is the cross, ultimately, of Jesus Christ. And if we follow the cross, that's why the Stavro Proskylissia was last week, and today the ladder, they should be seen together by the church. Notice the angel is helping the man at the top, and notice how their beards change in color. They get whiter. But that's not for everybody. I have a white beard, but I'm nowhere near up there. But it's a theological image there, that as we get older, we should get higher. But unfortunately, sometimes the older people get, the more stuck in their way they are, and the lower they are. They don't want to go up. They're down at the bottom. But notice you can fall at any time. That's the danger of the ladder. That the higher you get spiritually, the more egoismo you have, the more arrogant you become, the more you point at other people. I don't like this, I don't like that. And before you know it, whoop, back down again. Notice the man who is falling, he has white beard. And he's falling. You see someone else who has already fallen in the mouth of hell. That represents the mouth of the dragon. The mouth of the Leviathan is the word used in the Old Testament Psalms. Notice the demons in black. You never see their faces. They have a tool. Usually you'll see demons, they have some kind of a tool in which they are grabbing people. Because different tools for different people. One sin may not entice one person, you need another one. So I said this is a simple icon. Other icons, you see many, many different kinds of demons pulling the saints down as they're going higher and higher. And you see Christ at the top, receiving the person, bringing him up ultimately so that they can experience the kingdom of heaven. I offer this to you so that you can know a little bit about St. John. And as I said, God willing, next year we'll buy some books. You can buy them. And then we can together look at them and find our way growing in the image and likeness of God. Please rise. Stomen kalos, stomen metafobu, prostomen in eginen aforan in ilini prosperi.
Re
He has left us these gifts according to his commandment. For when he was about to go forward to his voluntary and memorable and life-giving death, giving up his life unto the world. Alon God, Ine, και παραδείγμα αυτού υπέρ του κόσμου ζωής, λαγωνάρχους αυτού Αγίων αυτών και εσύν, αναδείξας ή το Θεό του Πατρί και ευχαριστήσας, ευλογήσας, αγιάσας. Έδωκε της αρχής αυτού μαθητές και αποστόλης υπόν, λάβετε, φάγετε, τούτο μου εστί το σώμα, το ημεριμόν πλώμενον εις άφεσιν αμαρτιών. Likewise, he took the cup of the fruit and the wine, and having mingled it, offered thanks and blessing and sanctified it. He gave it to his holy apostles and disciples, saying, "Drink of it, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for you and for many unto the forgiveness of sins." The the word of your truth. Your Christos κατά διάνοια έχει και πάντων και πασών. And grant with one voice and one heart we may glorify and praise your most honored and majestic name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, now and always and to ages of ages. Amen. Και έστατα λέει του μεγάλου Θεού και σωτήρος ημών Ιησού Χριστού με τα πόντων ημών μετά το πνεύματός σου πάντων των Αγίων ημωνέσαντες έτη και έτη εν ειρήνη του Κυρίου δεητόρεν Κυρία Λαϊσόν υπέρ των προσκομιστέντων και αγιαστέντων τιμίων δώρων του Κυρίου δεητόρεν Κυρία Λαϊσόν. That our loving God who has received them as holy, heavenly, and spiritual altars an offering of spiritual fragrance, may in return send down upon us divine grace and the gift of the Holy Spirit. Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. In ενότητα της πίστεως και την κοινωνία του Αγίου Πνεύματος πλησάμενοι αυτούς και αλλήλους και πάσα την ζωή ημών, Χριστό το Θεό παραδόμεθα. Και καταξίωσον ημάς δέσποτα με της Ευχαριστίας, ακατακρίτως των μάτ, επικαλείστε σε τον ουράνιον Θεόν Πατέρα και λέγει. Όλοι μαζί, Πάτερ ημών, ο εν της ουρανής, αγιαστείτε το όνομά σου, έλθετε η βασιλεία σου, γεννηθείτε το θέλημά σου, ως εν ουρανό και επί της γης, των άρτων ημών των επιούσιων, δώσει μην σήμερα, και άφησε μην τα πελήματα ημών, ως και εμείς αμοιβές τους βελέσεις ημών, και εμείς ενέχεις ημάς πειρασμών, αλλά ρίστε εμάς από τον νεογυρού. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, now and always, and to ages of ages. Amen. Peace be with you all. And with your spirit. Thus give Allah, Simon, to Kyrio Klinomen. O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, hear us from your holy dwelling place and from the glorious throne of your kingdom. You are enthroned on high with the Father and are also visibly present among us. Come and sanctify us, and let your pure body and your precious blood be given to us by your mighty hand, and through us to all your people. Άρητη και εκτιμής και φιλανθρωπία, του μονογενού σου Υιού με του ευλογητώσει, συν το Παναγίου και αγαθό, και στο οποίο σου πνεύμα την και αή, και έσους αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Ο Θεός λαστεί με του μαρτωλών πλέσσον. ευχαριστούμε για την καθάριστον Κύριε Χριστός. Το δίπλο σου του μυστικού σήμερα μέγας εν Χριστού το μυστήριο νύχτας
Stay με παραλάβες, μου φύγαπης εκρίσου το μυστήριον ηχό, μου φύγας είδωσου κατάφερο Ιούδας, άλλος ολιστής ομολογώσει, Χριστίτη μου Κύριε, όταν έρθεις εν τη βασιλεία σου, Χριστίτη μου δέσποτα, όταν έρθεις εν τη βασιλεία σου, Χριστίτη μου Άγιο, όταν έρθεις εν τη βασιλεία σου.
Σώσον ο Θεός των λαών σου και ευλόγησον την κληρονομία σου, O Lord, save your people and bless your inheritance.
Είδαμε το φως το αληθινό ελάβομεν, πνεύμα εμποράδια, έμπροσθες την αληθή, γέρες των τριάδικος τους μόντες, αντιγαρινάς, έσωσε.
Πάντοτε νικαίοι και στους αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Ορθείτε τα λαβώντες των θείων Αγίων αχράντων αθανάτων εκρανίων, των ποιών φρικτών του μυστηρίων, αξίως ευχαριστήσομεν το Κύριο.
Κύριε Λέησον, Κύριε Λέησον, Κύριε Λέησον.
Ατιλάκους όσων ελέησον και διαφύλαξον ημάς ο Θεός της ικανητή.
Κύριε Λέησον, Κύριε Λέησον, Κύριε Λέησον.
Having prayed for the unity of the faith, sinless day, let's commit ourselves and one another and our whole life unto Christ our God. Ότι εσύ ο Αγίας Γος ημών και εσύ τη δόξαν αναπέμπωθεν του Πατρί και του Υιού και του Αγίου Πνεύματι, νυν και αεί και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
Αμήν.
Εν ειρήνη προέλθομεν του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν.
Λέησον, Κύριε Λέησον, Κύριε Λέησον, Πάτερ Άγιε ευλόγησον.
O Lord, bless those who praise you and sanctify those who put their trust in you. Save your people, bless your inheritance. Protect the whole body of your church, sanctify those who love the beauty of your house. Glorify them in return by your divine power, and do not forsake us who place our hope in you. Grant peace to your world, to your churches, to the clergy, to those in public service, to the armed forces, and to all your people. Ότι πάσα δώσεις αγαθή και παντόρυμα, τέλειον άνω την εστί καταβαίνουν εξού του πετρός των φώτων. Και συν την δόξαν και ευχαριστίαν και προσκύνησιν αναπέμπομεν, το Πατρί και το Υιό και το Αγίο Πνεύματι, νυν και αεί και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
Αμήν. Το όνομα Κυρίου ευλογημένο από τον ύμ και έως του αιώνων.
Το όνομα Κυρίου ευλογημένο από τον ύν και έως του αιώνων.
Όνομα Κυρίου ευλογημένο.
Από τον ύν και έως του αιώνος.
I know that it's not in your worship guide, but I was just handed a piece of paper with the name Panayotis to offer a Messiah. So I want to ask the members of the parish council to be ready. After we finish the Messiah, we will do the oath of office, and then we will pass the script. Με τα πνευμάτων δικαίωτε τελειωμένων, την ψυχή του δούλου σου σώτεραν άπαυσον φυλάτων αυτήν, εις την μακαρίαν ζωή την παρασύ φιλάνθρωπε.
Στην κατάπαυσή σου, Κύριε, από πάντες οι Αγίοι σου αναπαύονται ανάπαυσον και την ψυχή του δούλου σου ότι μόνος υπάρχεις αθάνατος.
Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. O Savior, you are our God who descended into Hades and delivered from suffering those who were there Give rest also to the soul of your servant.
Δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγία Πνεύματι, αιώνας των αιώνων, αμήν. Αγνητιάκοντος Παρθένος, εις Θεόν αφράστος Κύρισσον, πρέσβευε είπες του ελαϊθήνε και συγχωρηθήνε την ψυχή του δούλου σου.
Μετά των Αγίων Αναπόστολων Χριστέ, την ψυχή του δούλου σου, έλα του και στην πόνος, ελέησον ημάς ο Θεός, από το μέγαλος, το μετάσου επάκουσον και ελέησον. Again, let us pray for the memory and the eternal rest of the servant of God, Panayotis, who has fallen asleep, and the forgiveness of all his sins, whether voluntary or involuntary. May the Lord God grant his soul with a righteous repose, with the mercies of God, the kingdom of heaven, and the forgiveness of his sins. Όπως Κύριος ο Θεός τάξουν ψυχήν αυτού ένταιδη και να παύλε, τα ελέη του Θεού τη βασιλεία του ουρανών και άμεσιν αυτών αμαρτιών, παρά Χριστό το θανάτου βασιλεί και Θεό ημών, ετισόμεθα.
Παράσκω Κύριε,
Του Κυρίου δεηθώμε.
Κύριε λαϊσόν.
O God of spirits and of every flesh, who have trampled down death, abolishing the power of the devil, giving life to this your world, give rest to your departed servant Panayotis, in a place of repose, in a place of light, in a place of refreshment, where there is no pain, sorrow, or suffering. As a good and loving God, forgive every sin that he may have committed in thought, word, or deed, for there is no one who lives and is sinless. You alone are without sin. Your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and your word is truth. But to see an apostasis και η ζωή και ανάπαυσης των συγκεκριμένων δούλων σου Παναγιώτου του Χριστέου Θεός ημών, και εσύ την δόξα να αναφέρουμε έτσι τον Άρα σου Πατρί και το Παναγίο και αγαθό και το Θεό σου Πνεύματι, νυν και αεί και στους αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Αιωνία recite after me, repeat after me. I do solemnly affirm that I will uphold the dogma, teaching, traditions, holy canons, worship, and moral principles of the Greek Orthodox Church, as well as the constitutional charter, discipline, and regulations of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. And that I will faithfully and sincerely fulfill the duties, obligations required of a member of the Parish Council. So help me God. Congratulations. You may be seated. Good morning once again. I hope you don't feel as though I tire you out during the liturgy by offering you a little catechism. As you know, in other churches, even in the Catholic Church, the sermon is much longer because the service is much smaller. So it puts us at a disadvantage as Greek Orthodox because most people say, you got to get us out at a certain time. And unfortunately, we cut out the things that are very, very important, and that is to learn about our faith. So again, I apologize if you think that I'm doing this to tire you. I do it because I love you and I want you to get as much as you can from coming to church. Because I know I've heard from so many people over the years, Father, I go to church, I hear the same thing over and over again. Jesus loves me, I have to love him, and give money to the trade, and that's it. So I'm trying to give you something a little bit more substantial as opposed to just baby food. I want to thank the parish council, the people who want to work in the parish council because they're giving up their time. It would be so much easier just to come, light a candle, and leave, but no, they want to help as much as possible. And trust me, in small communities, there's more work to be done because there are less people to do it. So although you're not on the parish council, those of you who are not, you are still members of the community, members of the family, and you have to help too. I remember growing up at home, my father would say, take out the garbage, clean the dishes, You get to do something here too, cut the grass. So we are all members of the family. We should not think of anything beneath us. We should do everything that we can in order to serve the church. I remember, I will never forget, my freshman year, I had a class with Father Climacus. I don't know if you know that name. He is a very well-distinguished professor, theologian, priest in our archdiocese. He is retired now. He's got to be, how old would you say, 80s, probably. And he's written many, many books. He taught ethics for the church, very close to the patriarch, all the patriarchs. So I had him as a professor. I was lucky, and I'll never forget, he said, boys, he said, when you go to your church, never, ever think it beneath you to change the toilet paper in the bathrooms. And I always has stuck on me because it was quite a eye-opening statement from him. And what he was trying to say is that we all are members of God's family, and nothing should be beneath us. If Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, how much more should we offer to one another? So we should be helping set up, we should be helping with the festivals, we should be helping. Whenever we see something, let's do it and not wait for someone else to do it. And if we want to be on the parish council, then we should do our work as well. So again, that's my little commercial for serving the church. I want to thank you. You continue to aspire to be good pace setters and donors of the church. We had another donor last week, and now I think we're at 23 pace setters. We need 2 more to meet my goal of 25, and then you won't hear me saying this again. No, I'll continue. But I'm hoping that we get 25. I'm working on someone now that I'm pretty sure they're going to go to become a pace setter as well, so we'll need 1 more after that. It's the only way churches like this can survive, is to all of us say $20 a week. We can, of course, not all of us can. So it seems, one more thing, Vaniotti had asked me to remind you that in the Holy Week schedule on Holy Thursday, it says that the liturgy will begin at 10. It's going to begin at 9:30, half hour earlier, because Peter has to be at work, and many of you have asked it to be a little earlier so that you can go back to work as well. So please make that a note of that. We're going to put it in the bulletin, but I have to keep saying it so people will tell others. 9:30, not 10 o'clock, Holy Thursday. So it seems as though a tragedy takes place every weekend, unfortunately. Past weekend, we read about a 24-year-old college student. She was a senior at the South Carolina University. I'm sure you've heard the story. She was out with her friends. She got separated from them somehow. She needed to get back to the dormitory. She called an Uber. The Uber came, although she thought it was the Uber driver. She got into the car, and 17 hours later they found her dead body 90 miles away. And her father on Facebook was lamenting, obviously crying, saying, "I will always love my baby girl, and I don't want this to happen to anybody else." I shared something similar with you a few weeks ago, and here we go again. Imagine being in a car, or anywhere, but in a car, thinking that this person is going to take you where you want to go, and this person was so evil, and he was only 24 years old as well, that he had put the child locks on the door so that when she got in, she couldn't get back out. You can imagine what through her mind at the end of her life. And what a father must go through in order to be told that his daughter was murdered that way because of an Uber driver. Have you ever been in a position in which you have lost control and you put your life in the hands of someone else? Maybe when you were young, I know that I have. As a young man, being in the car, people drinking, it shouldn't be. I know I shouldn't be in the car. I am. They're going very fast. I should be at home. My parents said, don't do these things. And yet, here I am, a passenger in a car driven by somebody else who is drunk. By the grace of God, nothing happened. But there are others who find themselves in a very difficult situation in their life. Imagine when you get older, putting your hands in the wrong person. Maybe a wife to her husband, a husband to the wife. Maybe a worker to his employer. Knowing that you're going in the wrong direction, but there's nothing you can do. This person has control over your life. And you're trying to get away from it. And you find yourself doing bad things because you have been led to do bad things. Not just for young people, for older people as well. I share this with you because for the last couple of months, I've been asked to help a non-profit organization in Boca called Home Boca. It's a non-for-profit that wants to help the homeless in Boca. And so for the last 2 months, I've been going Saturday morning and meeting with homeless people. You would think that, no, there are no homeless people in Boca. Trust me, there are many. 150 of them have been showing up at the First Methodist Church in their hall on Saturday mornings. And we offer them a shower. We bring some barbers so that they can cut their hair, wash their clothes in a laundromat. There are women and men that come and do manicures for them, fix their hair, shave them, give them some clothes, and they go back out into the street. We try to find jobs for them. We try to find a place for them to stay. And we try as much as possible to get them off drugs, off of alcohol. Most of them are a mess. You can imagine how much it stinks in there in the beginning. By the time we finish with them, they are at least clean for one more week. And so it's an honor for me, a privilege that they ask me to help them put their organization together to do better work in Boca. So I started 2 months ago giving them a little talk, the homeless. They never had that before. They call me Pastor Frank. And I offer them a little sermonette, but really small. And I mentioned that story to them yesterday morning. And you could have heard a pin drop. The homeless were around me as I was telling the story of the young girl, what happened to her. And I said, do you think that's happened to you? You find yourself homeless, not because you wanted to, but something happened in your life. Maybe you hurt other people. And the slogan of the organization is from homelessness to wholeness. And I told them that in order to be whole, it's more than just your body and your mind, but it's also your soul. And they love it when I give them a little bit of spirituality. I didn't tell them about St. John of the Ladder, but I told them of someone else who had made mistakes. Remember David, the king in the Old Testament? And he wrote the 142nd Psalm that we read in the Orthodox service every time in the Orthodox Church. And in there it says, "O Lord, show me the way I should go. Protect me. I put my soul in your hands. Lead me the way I should be. Protect me." And it really resonated with them. And that's why I share it with you as well, because you don't have to be homeless physically to be homeless spiritually. To be in the wrong car, moving in the wrong direction, away from God as opposed to moving towards God. This is really the purpose of this morning, the 4th Sunday of Great Lent. The gospel lesson this morning was another father lamenting his son. Last week it was a father lamenting the death of his daughter. Today it's a father lamenting his son who is possessed. Help him. I've brought him everywhere. No one can help him. Something keeps throwing him down in the fire, in the water. Help. And Jesus says something very interesting. He says, "O faithless generation, how long am I going to bear with you?" In other words, you still don't get it, in other words, he's saying. Bring the boy to me. Very powerful, we can miss that. The issue in the story is that Jesus says, don't go looking for solutions other places. If you want a solution, if you want to come home, if you want healing, if you want peace in your life, if you want to change your direction, go to me, he says. Not somewhere else. And this is really the lesson that I tried in my small way, humble way, to the homeless people, is that ultimately your life will change only through Jesus Christ. Only. Yes, psychiatrists and psychologists and people can give you jobs, but until you change the inside, you will never be whole. You will never find what is really missing in your life. And this is really Great Lent for us. We're trying to get home too. 40 days in the wilderness, 40 days Lent, 40 years the Jews wandering in the desert. How many of us are wandering? How many individuals generally are lost? Moving in the wrong direction, being controlled by something else. So we see the ladder of divine ascent. We see St. John Climacus, the church in its wisdom says, perfect, we'll put it on that Sunday, and those who have knowledge will know to go there so that they can climb from this world to heaven, to their home. It's not our home here. We are pilgrims here. We don't realize it, unfortunately, until the end of our life. I wish that you could be a priest for a day or two to be at the deathbed of individuals. 42 years I've done this, and I've been at the deathbed of many, many people. No one has said, you know what, I should have worked more, I should have spent more, I needed a few more cars, I needed to go to Greece more, I needed to go to the beach. No, you know what they said? I should have been a better person. I missed out on my life. That's what they feel sorry about. Because they realize at that point that time has gone away, and now, hopefully, there is the great by and by where we can be with the Lord. Let's learn from them, especially St. John Climacus. Let's not fall. Let's not lean the ladder against the wrong wall. That's why in the church, the ladder is against the cross. The ladder is not against something else. As I mentioned after the creed, we put it leaning against the cross because that's how we get up, not some other thing. And we have to be very careful because in this world we tell our children, we do the very same thing that the Uber driver did. We tell our children, oh, I care so much about you. You need to do sports. You need to go to an art class. You need to go to music class. You need to learn the violin. You need to learn this. You need to learn that. And in reality, what we're doing is we're leading them in the wrong direction. Yes, that's important too. Good academics, good personality, know your talents, you play great sports. Beautiful, in its place. But ultimately, the most valuable thing we can ever give our children is a relationship with Jesus Christ. Hence, today, the Father, bring the boy to me. He's not just talking to him, he's talking to us. Our job is to bring our children, ourselves, to God, not somewhere else. Otherwise, we've been duped by the secular Uber of this world, and before you know it, we will be hurt. And we will be physically or spiritually dead and homeless as well. Let me end. Much could be said, but let me just end with, I'm sure that most of our cars now have GPS. I'm sure you have GPS. And I don't know if you're like me, but even though I put the GPS and it tells me you should turn here, sometimes I say, no, it's making a mistake, and I don't listen. You ever done that? And you do that, and then it says, recalculate. And then you keep making the wrong turn, recalculate. Until finally, even though you have something, a guide that's telling you how to get where, you can actually get lost. You can actually get lost. we need such a GPS in the church as well. And I would think that today it would be wrong of me to not tell you that the ladder of divine ascent, the scriptures of the church, are a great GPS to keep us in the right direction, moving towards the Lord. If we bring ourselves to Him with our children, I guarantee you that at the end of our life, we will not be homeless, but actually getting ready to inherit the kingdom of heaven. May the Lord be with you, and may He continue to bless us and our families and protect our children wherever they might be. Please rise. Του Κυρίου δεηθούμε, ευλογία της Κύριος, έλθει επί μας και αυτού διαχάρητη και φιλανθρωπία, πάντοτε νίκαιοι και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Δόξα Συ ο Θεός, επίσημον δόξα Συ. Ο Αναστάς εκ νεκρών Χριστός, ο αληθινός Θεός ημών, τις πρεσβείες Παναχράντου και Παναμόμου Αγίας του Μητρός, δυνάμει του Τιμίου Σοφίου Σταυρού, προστασίες των τιμήν επρανήν δυνάμουν ασμάτων και εσείς του μείον δόξου προφήτη του δρόμου και ο Χριστού Ιωάννου. Με μείον δόξου που νεφήμεν αποστόλων,
Io